I was thinking about reading scripts, and I try not to read a script with a pencil in hand, because I try not to interrupt the flow of it, but it's an absolute bitch because as I'm reading, it's playing out like a freaking movie in my head, and I don't know I'm going to have that experience again, whether it's right or wrong.
Hey, thanks for listening. This week I tossed out a post on Blue Sky about not knowing who's listening to this podcast, which, who's listening or seeing or reading or watching is a core concern for all creators. I'm really proud of the conversations that I've had here and quite the embarrassment of riches when it comes to my guest list. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous who I've spoken with. But outside of a great group of listeners, I really have no idea who's out there. And thank you to the people who do let me know. It's not a matter of the validation. I guess I'm a constant second guesser going, did I not tick the right box? And is this just falling into a trash heap and nobody knows? There's a big chunk of me that doesn't care. Hell, I've been doing this for 3 years. I don't do this for money. I haven't asked for money, but there's a chunk of me that logistical part of my brain that wants to have some numbers. I can get over it. I mean, I tell you, I get over it every single time I wrap up a talk and, we just have a lovely sort of post recording chat. But there's a big chunk of, yeah, that feels great. But then there are these hollows and you go, oh, what am I doing? One of the things that brought this to the surface was I had to take 100 episodes down with so many of these guests who have graciously come back onto the show. And this is sort of an influx of guests that I didn't have sort of mapped out. Now it's like, oh, yeah, remember that original guest list that you had of dream people? Well, you can add them back in. And it's daunting. Now I have a backlog of episodes. I've been recording with a bunch of amazing creators in the last month. And I have more of them than I have Tuesdays. It's just a simple numbers game. And it drives me crazy because some of them have specific needs that they need to be out at a certain time and others don't. But I want them all to be out there because I'm really happy about them, and apologies to the, ones who recorded with me weeks ago and haven't yet heard theirs. It pains me too. I want to get them out there. But some people have a book coming out this week, or tomorrow in this case. And that's why we have today's guest on, who, by the way, is Duncan Fegredo, which is awesome. There's a part of me that wants to do this 2 days a week. The workload is insane to consider, but I'm just saying until I can get through this overload of episodes, put it out on Tuesday, put it out on Friday. It's tough because, listen, it takes time to edit these things and, make the graphics and schedule stuff, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know how feasible it is for an ongoing thing, but maybe for a short period of time. I hope that gets cool with you. And please let me know if you think it's too much, because I don't want to overload you. I know that I feel overloaded with podcasts that I listen to, so I don't want that to be some sort of fatigue syndrome. And there could be thousands of you listening. I don't think there are, but there could be, and that's great. And you may want more, and I would be happy to make more. But I also have to consider, I have a life, I have work, I have dreams of my own, which I want to put out there. I don't know. This is me just spitballing this idea, and hopefully maybe everything settles back down. I don't have to think about it, or maybe this is something that builds into something else. Who knows? Anyway, enough of that. Today's guest is Duncan Fegredo. This is a very long conversation compared to the others, so I hope you enjoy that. He is a fan's perennial favorite and artist's perennial favorite. Anybody who makes comics, you say his name and they go, wow, yeah, that guy's the best. And he is. We go through all of like the permutations of his sort of his career from his point of view. And, you know, we talk about his work with Vertigo in 2000 AD, Jay and Silent Bob, but we also talk about the literally unknown California project he did from the 93, 94 movie with Brad Pitt and I think Juliette Lewis. I put a link in the description. It's fucking awesome thing. So go check it out if you haven't seen it. If you have, go back to it. And of course, listen, Hellboy, his work in Hellboy is, you know, magical. I mean, getting to draw that character as much as he has must be such an honor and a privilege and a joy. And he's come back with Giant Robot Hellboy, and the first issue comes out tomorrow on the 25th. It's awesome. There's a preview also in the description, so you can click on that and see a few pages. This is me with Duncan Fegredo.
Eye things are the worst when you're an artist. Well, and hand things and...
Sure. Right. You know. Yeah. Hands and eyes are probably the number one concerns. You know, I recall I was in my studio. This was like 1994, 95. And I was just having like those headaches, you know, those drawing headaches after like at the end of like midday. And I'm like, what's going on? And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to need glasses. I'm going to, you know, freaking out all those levels, go to the eye doctor. And he's like, no, you're okay, but you're just straining your closed focus. Like he just kept saying, you know, he's like, you know, like listen, every hour, just look across the room for 5 minutes, look out the window, like just do that. And it made all the difference in the world.
It's that and unclench your teeth.
Yeah.
And in fact, here comes to that. It's like every other muscle in your body that you don't realize. It's like drawing rigor mortis when you realize the only thing that's actually moving is this tiny percentile of your arm. Right. Yeah.
The holding of the breath, like that.
Yeah.
I you know, and I still, you know, I still do. I did a little bit of inking on some pieces recently, and I just remember, and I don't do it that much anymore. But then I'm like doing these sort of the long curve arc with a brush. I'm going, and you're holding your breath. You know, it's that whole, okay, like I'm just so tense about the process.
Well, it's brave of you to do it. I wouldn't even try. It's you know, I don't have that sort of control. I have to worry those things that look, you know, you want them to look fluid, but I have to worry them out and make them look fluid in the process. That sort of stuff doesn't come naturally to me. Or it probably would if I could ever actually, you know, relax my tight ass. But,
totally. I meditate every morning, and I have to, like, when I'm doing it, I'll sit there and I'll realize like my mouth isn't relaxed. I'm like, okay, relax, just relax your lips, you know, like it's all these kind of little like micro muscle groups that like are just doing that thing.
I mean, that one of the things I've dealt with a lot over the years is sleeplessness, and so I tried various ways of you know, I'd listen. Podcasts are great for that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. You know, you can fall asleep while you're listening to something, but if you just want to clear your head, using one of those sleep process apps, but the trouble is they all do this thing of, you know, relax your breathing, and they start with that. And I'm asthmatic, and there is nothing relaxing about breathing. If I think about breathing, then I'm aware of breathing. Yeah. And it'd be like trying to think about how you walk when you walk, and instantly you can't do it because none of that makes sense. It's like, what am I doing? I'm pushing myself forward. I'm falling over onto the next leg. Well, what if I miss?
Right. Totally.
I've been known to do that as well, and panic inducing. So saying relax is like, well, time to tighten up, time to tense.
That's, you know, and that's, I mean, because listen, like breathing's a thing, you know, like heartbeat and breathing, we should be thinking about those things, right? And
no.
Yeah. But I mean, like for you, it's been a lifelong consciousness of your breath, right?
That's it. Yeah. So you don't let it go easily, though.
No. Yeah. So, I mean, it's, you know, and what makes me kind of tie in some interesting thought is that like Adam Hughes cites his having mono when he was like 19 as his breakthrough moment as an artist. He was kind of that young amateur artist and didn't have the discipline, but then he was stuck in bed for 3 months or so, and all he did was draw. And he said, like, that was the time that afforded me to be able to kind of break a lot of the bad habits or whatever they were to get to that next level when we eventually would see him, you know, coming out. And like, do you think like being like asthmatic, maybe that, so you weren't, you know, running about maybe as much as your fellow mates, like, was that a sort of a thing for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm still just stuck on the idea of Adam Hughes only coming to this at 19 and doing that. And I'm thinking, like, if he said 9, I would have felt much better about it.
Right.
19's problematic.
Yeah.
To get, you know, to appear to come out the gate that good.
I'm sure he was. This is Adam being, you know, humble, I'm sure, to a degree, but I think for him, that was a moment in his life where it kind of changed.
Yeah, I'm reading that as, yeah, I agree. He must have sucked at first anyway. And I feel a lot better about it.
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is that thing. I mean, I was never going to excel at sports at school or anything like that because I had limited capacity. And I frankly wasn't interested. And I don't know whether I wasn't interested in sport because of the asthma or whether I simply wouldn't have been interested anyway. That's something I've never actually considered, I must admit. But it's like that. It was that thing, the one place where I knew I could shine compared to my classmates was drawing, because that was the thing I spent more time doing, because it was a solitary thing. I didn't, you know, no team needed, no going outside needed. It was just me, a pencil, and a piece of paper, just copying drawings out of comics. And it was something I could do that, you know, and I'm sure it's a common story, I'm sure. It's that thing you discovered, the one thing you can do that singles you out from everybody else. And I enjoyed it. There was a pleasure to be gained from it. I don't know. It must be just one of those things that I don't know. I don't know what compelled me to do it, but there's that thing. There's something that must be some reward in your brain. It's like you copy a drawing, you copy a photo, you copy a drawing, you get close to it, and your brain sort of releases a small chemical to enlighten your system and say, "Yay, well done, you."
Yeah.
You feel good about yourself now, don't you? So do some more.
Yeah, and it's you know, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of things that happen with our brains as far as like, and I'm just going to speak for comic artists, but I can't speak for all the other disciplines out there. But I think that we spend a lot of time looking at these things at the comics, and we become very much visually attached to what work looks like. And I think our acumen naturally is higher at that point, at an earlier point, than maybe the kids who aren't spending all their time staring at comic books and then copying the drawings. So our distinguishing sort of factor is when we see our drawing and we look, okay, well, it's not exactly the thing, but it's closest as I've ever gotten. Well, maybe someone who doesn't have that acumen may do a drawing and go, well, that's good enough. That's pretty good. I'm proud of that. And then they never kind of go back to it. Like they don't chase that sort of little bit of but like, oh, that hand doesn't look good, you know? And then you're like, next time I'm going to try to make a better hand.
Yeah, I think you're right. And thinking about it, there's the flip side of that is not so much the flip side. It's what is it that actually makes you actually like the comic image in the first place? What is it? These, because it's not a single image, is it? It's a sequence of images. So I think it's communication ultimately. It's an emotional response to this sequence of images, and it's kind of it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. It's a mysterious thing of that thing of putting separate images next to each other, and one image and another image, and something in between. It implies motion between the two, or an emotional exchange between the two. And I think at a young age, you're probably more susceptible to that, but don't know why.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes along with one of those with the whole idea of actually learning languages as well. I think you're actually just more open to it. You have maybe it's like an innate understanding of implications between a sequence of images, and the same thing actually occurs with learning languages. And I think it's one of those. It's one of those things. I really wish I'd started to learn French
Mhm.
when I was, 8, 9 or something. I probably would have resented the hell out of it, hated it, but I suspect it would have gone in better
Yeah.
because if it was just introduced in a natural way, in a way that's in a comic. Like I'm looking at these images, like maybe if I'd seen Tintin at that age,
Mhm.
actually okay, it wasn't French, but you know, if it had been French, for instance, I might have been compelled, like, well, okay, I'm seeing stuff here going on.
Yeah.
I want to know what's going on in these. I want to know the full image.
Yeah.
I want to know the full spectrum of the information in this process. I just think maybe that's the thing that kids who aren't interested in drawing so much or aren't interested in developing those things simply, and I am tangenting around somewhat here. They're just not picking up on those same beats that communicate. You might get the bare bones of the information that's presented to you, but you're
Mhm.
not getting the full spectrum of the information that is being imparted by these images to you.
The language, you know what it is? Because storytelling is a language. And
Yeah,
to be able to, like, we all know that kids can pick up these, very young children can pick up languages at a faster rate. And that I think it's a very similar situation, because I mean, you think about it, our reading skills probably aren't very high when we first engage with comic books. So the visuals become more important on on what's happening. And we interpolate the events and the in between things that happen in the gutters, and that language sort of gets imprinted on us, and we're kind of sort of, by no fault of our own, stuck with it. And we have this kind of natural understanding of, okay, well, this is how a visual story is told. And
yeah,
huh.
yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that's exactly it. And I think even if you stop, yeah, as you say, your reading age, as it's described, is might not be that high because you even the written language within the comic strip that there may be stuff you may not understand, and I'm thinking I'm pretty much going back to early exposures to Fantastic Four,
Mm-hmm.
Lee and Kirby, and I knew there was something about the words, but I might not have, I could tell it sounded grand, had a grandeur about it, but if I didn't understand the individual words, or I certainly understood the context
Mm-hmm.
because the image was doing the rest. I mean, and then some.
Yeah.
And I think that, and you take that, then it's going to make you want to read more, isn't it? It's going to
Sure.
encourage you to, develop your reading skills.
Yeah. And I mean, I admittedly was a twice comic reader. I would read it by looking at the pictures. So I'd learn that story first, or experience that story, and then I would go back and then I would read all the story with the word balloons to kind of know, oh, what were they saying, what was happening, because I think it was almost a challenge for me to guess what was going on without having it told to me.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, apart from anything else, it's like you've laid down money for this. You want to get full value out of it anyway. It's going to, I mean, if you stopped then at 2 readings, I'd be very surprised.
Yeah.
I
Oh
mean, you could probably, I mean, you might not actually even read the same books again now, but you could actually hear them when you see them now because you've gone over them so many times.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the it's one of those situations where, and it's as it is with normal reading, just reading a novel or watching a film. You get older, your life experience increases. You just take in more information, and your context is different. You return to the same piece of writing, and you may discover just reading something. Oh, they were referring to this thing, or oh, they've been reading. You know, I'm not widely read at all, but it's just one of those things. It's like you realise things aren't created in a vacuum.
No.
Everything flows into it, and you don't exist in a vacuum. It's a two-way street. It is. It's like pretty much one of those things, situations of you get out what you put in.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't know you're putting the time in, you are taking stuff. You know, you're absorbing. You're a sponge.
Yeah.
You take in information all the time.
No, I for sure, and it's an interesting thing. You know, I mean, you and I share a very similar interest level when it comes to comics, even though I don't draw them anymore. I loved the storytelling part, figuring out the layout, blocking out everything, you know, getting all the sort of everything in place. And then I would sit there and I go, I got to render this. Like it would be this wall of
Yeah.
me, and I would, you know, and if I ever had to like ink my own thing, I was of the set who would pencil everything completely and then go towards it with a brush and a pen. And kids, don't do that. Figure out how to do the inking.
No.
Less the drawing.
The crazy thing is, no, I relate all too well. I used to be, I'm not going to say fearless, but more fearless than I used to be. Certainly back when I was drawing Enigma, my pages were so roughly penciled. But I don't know whether that was, well, I was trying to figure out how to draw for ink at that stage. And yeah, it's not something I had really developed before. But I would but when I went in one, I figured I'd sort it out in the inks. And up until then, my ink work previously had been, you know, college work, whatever, where I was doing sub Ralph Steadman-esque scratchy pen lines and spatter, and expression was the order of the day. And I meld that with a lot of love for 2000 AD art, and, you know, craziness would ensue on the page. There'd end up being a lot of patch paper as a result when things didn't go well. But it didn't matter. One of the things I learned at college was, you know, if you're drawing for reproduction, it doesn't matter what you do to the page as long as it can photograph in black and white. And I took that to heart. So patch paper, white out, redrawing, patch, you know, patches on patches on patches. This was comics for sensory deprivation with eyesight. You know, you wouldn't get the story, but you could tell shit was going on the page. Certainly,
it was going down.
Yeah. As time went on, and I became, I don't know, it's that thing. You develop, drawing skills developed, and I became more aware, desperate. Well, even halfway through Enigma, I was trying to tame what I was doing. I was trying to tame that excess. And the artwork, I gained clarity, and that continued on, even more so. But by the time I got to Hellboy, I got to the stage where I'd penciled the page. Think I can't erase all this stuff. It's so engraved in the paper now. I'll scan it, print it out, and I'll ink the blue lines, because then I can be free, and if I screw it up, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Which never actually quite happened, but, you know, it was just like, it's that thing where you end up, between thumbnails and layouts and penciling and ink, and I'm drawing the job multiples of times.
It's crazy.
It is crazy, and it's that thing. It's that balance. Is like, I do lament the loss of what I did on early Enigma in some ways. I still get people saying like, "Oh, that was my favorite stuff," and I despaired of it at the time, because it was so out of control. It was so not what I wanted.
Right.
Even I guess I was actually surprised I even knew that was what I wanted. I suppose that was new information to me. I thought I knew what I was doing, not a bit of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it's nothing. You gain control and you lose energy. So it's trying to find that balance somewhere. And if you don't find a balance, you've got to find a way of putting it back into it
Yeah.
somehow.
That's
And you try different techniques.
That's so perfect. That is that it's that you gain this ability, but you lose this energy in the process. And I think so Dave Johnson and I used to be roommates for a while, many, many moons ago. And we talked about that we were really both frustrated at how stale everything felt that we were doing. Like we'd built up such a process in our drawing technique where, thumbnail to drawing on onto copy paper, then light boxing that through, and then going and inking. And while note perfect in the terms of what it may have looked like on page, it missed the sort of the timing of jazz, in there.
Yeah.
And I remember
I get it completely.
Yeah. And it was this really interesting thing because, and I look back and I go, man, the technique sucks, but there's so much life and boldness and trying that you can see in old work that you go, and it's like that. It's the thumbnail, man. Like everything is in the thumbnail. Like that's all and then like at that point, it's all downhill as far as what the energy level goes. And then as we get older with anything, we don't have the energy to keep fighting that fight. So we have to really be clever in how we stage everything to begin with.
Yeah, I'm still fighting the same dumb fight, I think. It's like Mike Mignola recently did for the initial press release of the giant robot Hellboy. He said something, and I didn't see his release beforehand, and not every site carried it, but he actually made a point of saying, no matter how difficult you make things, he knows I'll always make it more difficult for myself because I can't help it.
Yeah,
and I really can't. I'm an idiot.
So okay, I'm at the fork of the road in thinking in our conversation. I'll try to do the tight circle back, and then we'll go on a little.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
we're going to be going backwards and forwards a lot. I suspect.
It's fine. So one thing that is interesting to me, because I mean, you predominantly have like had the career of kind of like finishing your own work. You weren't sort of subject to others in the black and white art process and the coloring process in some sense, but. So Michael Golden was my mentor in comics. So I was really lucky to get him early on in my life. And he was really adamant of me trying to get inkers that knew their shit to ink me, so then I could learn what I needed to know, what it needed to look like in the terms of like reproducibility. Like, how do you make this thing look good when it goes on the page? And he's, for him, he's like, listen, I was kind of flailing about until Craig Russell inked me. And then when Craig Russell inked me in the late, whenever it was like 78, he's like, okay, I understood what I needed to do with the drawing to make the final process look good, whether I inked it or somebody else. And I'm like, okay. And I think even with, Mike Mignola, that was the same case for him. I think he was, figuring it out in the 80s, and then he does some work. And once again, it might even have been Craig Russell, coming in again and inking him and sort of giving this sort of like understanding, and maybe a little bit of Kevin Nolan a little later, like, hey man, you can really go crazy with the blacks if you want to. So, and for you didn't have a bunch of that. So do you think you struggled more as the artiste in that respect, or do you, what is your make of that? Or am I an idiot?
No. I think you're absolutely right. I think it probably would have done me a lot of good to pencil for somebody else early on, and then see how see how they interpreted what I thought had clarity, and go,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you're faced with a different reality.
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, the nearest thing I had to that was like Sean Phillips and I swapped a few pages on a
Right.
on a Kid Eternity story. And I suppose there was a little bit of an element in that. I remember inking Sean's pages and marveling at how it was absolute clarity. It was, there was no noodling around on the paper. There was no, not gonna, I was gonna say no thought process on there at all, because that's not what I mean. The thought process wasn't contradicting itself on the page. It was all just there, straight down, and that's pretty much Sean. He has that sort of clarity. Whereas mine, you looked at my pencil pages, there's probably more erasing than there were pencils on the page in the end, finally, because I was so freaked out at the thought of somebody else having to interpret my drawings. And yet I still went in there when I did my inks over here and, well, I'm going to change that, which was pretty fucked up when I think about it. And it only occurred to me even after I'd sent it. Oh, hang on. He probably drew it that way for a reason. Maybe he wanted it that way,
right?
Because this is what, and obviously the same thing happened in reverse. It's just the ability to think beyond yourself, think yourself into another person's perspective. And I think that is something I've not got that in terms of drawing, I don't think, but maybe I've got a little bit better understanding of that in terms of storytelling, just from working with Mike, because I have been servicing his stories for such a period, and especially on the stories for the main Hellboy storyline. He had a very specific idea of what he wanted, and I was used to taking liberties with scripts, and I didn't even realize I was doing the same thing with Mike's. When I say take liberties, I'm not saying I'm cutting stuff out. If anything, I'm adding stuff in. I'm adding extra beats here and there, and I think it drove Mike pretty mad at times when I'd add in extra little panels and things, because for him it was slowing the action down. And I can see it now, looking back. It's one of those things where you should never only look back at old work with a drink or two to cushion the blow, because and also to give you a sense of clarity, to remove yourself from the situation a little bit, looking at the third person and realize, I can see what he meant.
Yeah.
Some things, I mean, but things got a lot easier as time went on, but there would always be sticking points where I could try and think, much as I try and think myself into his POV when it came to putting the pages together, it just wasn't going to happen. I'd have to get Mike to actually just draw a layout and say, look, just do it, because we're going to waste even more time doing this.
Yeah.
And I'm quite capable of doing that without any help. I'd rather, so let's get straight to it. That storytelling, yeah. The pencil and inking thing, I wish I had done more of it originally. It's easy to say in retrospect, but so everything isn't it? You can see all those mistakes laid out very clearly.
Yes.
Whether you're going to do anything about it now is a different matter. It's too late.
Right.
What's the point by now?
Well, I mean, the other thing is that you were a fully formed stylist in many ways when you showed up. So like your look was your look, even though it's evolved over the years. It doesn't feel like, oh, that, hey, Duncan's a lot like so-and-so. There wasn't a whole lot of that kind of crossover into other people's sort of creative Venn diagram. And I think I think editors look at it and they go, well, this is the look. What Duncan does is the look. And if we're hiring Duncan, that's the look that we're going to get. And it's not a matter of like, hey, we'll get so-and-so to ink you. We want the Duncan look. And,
that's a nice thought. I don't know if I don't know if it's completely true. I mean, I don't know that I ever had. You see, I would always try and just whatever it was I was doing, I would probably try. I would try and subsume any. I don't think I ever really thought of myself as having a style so much as I was the result of whatever I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I came onto if I came onto a project, and it's inevitably a mini thing, or a one off, I would try and take on a little bit of what went before. I like the idea of. I'm not a fan of continuity remotely, but in terms of continuity of look and feel, then I get that, because it's kind of like, if I'm going to come onto this book and do something, then I don't want to break it. I want to, and also it's a chance to try and do something, try and evoke something that I hadn't done before. So I'm thinking of things like. Not so much the stuff I did while I was working on Vertigo. Then there I was just I was just being me trying to. I was just trying to draw. I was literally. I mean, it's always just trying to draw a story,
Mm-hmm.
trying to draw it feeling right, and whatever comes out comes out. So if there's a styling there at that point, then it's a sum of lots and lots of stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And there are definitely influences that come into it, but sometimes it's very specific. Like, oh, I did a one shot thing with Steve Niles, Good Monsters, for Monsters on the Prowls thing. Uh, it was an early FF story, or it wasn't even. It was really. It was a Marvel team up, really. I suppose it was the Thing and the Hulk team up
Cool.
against lots of Kirby monsters. So I tried to get a bit of a Kirby on,
Yeah.
and that was fun because it actually. I mean, even at that stage, I was already getting jaded about comics anyway. But so to go back to the root of why you do these things, to try and take on, like, well, I want to try and draw the Hulk that looks a little bit like a Kirby Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing, he should definitely look like a pile of rocks. I don't want to give him a waistline to speak of or anything like that. It's a pile of frigging rocks in pants. And embrace this absurdity to do. I'm drawing the Fantastic off. Fantastic. It's the bathtub one. That's what it's got to be. So it just try and take on those things. Throw some Kirby machinery in there, but it's all melded with what I do anyway as well. So it's never. I'd never go full on pastiche. It's just trying to meld things, and it's not like anybody said you've got to do it this way. It's the way my head works.
Sure.
It's like, if I'm doing this, I feel like I should do this. Later on, what else am I thinking of? There was I did an X-Force single issue with so it was Michael Reed and Peter Milligan, and I thought, well, I want to have it feel a little bit like Peter Milligan, and there's probably a little bit of Darwin Cook in there as well. Actually, I think thinking about it, because I think he must have done one previous to mine, so it just made it more. It just makes it more interesting. That's probably, and you can probably see where this is going. I mean, I did the same thing when it came to Hellboy.
Yeah.
If I'm going to do Hellboy, I want it to be, I want it to have that feel of Hellboy, but meld it with my own. So I'm trying to take elements of Mike's work and meld it with my own. Nobody asked me to do it. I just did it because I felt like I didn't want to break that toy box. That was the world I was enjoying as a fan. That's what I wanted to see. The weird thing is, when someone actually says draw something specifically, or just even a throwaway comic, it's a completely different matter. I did Spider-Man's Tangled Web. There's another story with Pete Milligan, Flowers for a Rhino.
Mm-hmm.
And I was excited to draw it. It's only a couple of issues, and it's a great story. And I was literally about to start penciling. Or had I started penciling? No, you know what? I had actually started penciling, because this is when Axel Alonso, who was the editor at the time, said, like, so you're going to ink this in your slick style, yeah? And I couldn't draw anything for 2 fucking weeks because I had no idea what my slick style was.
Yeah.
And it just threw me completely.
Oh, wow.
Because all of a sudden it was like, I don't think he'd intended it. I think it was supposed to be encouraged. I don't know what the hell it was, but it was it screwed me completely. It did.
Well, it's funny because like I I relate so much when you say like the thought of like not really kind of being cognizant maybe of a style, and I remember talking to some friends and they're like, oh, oh, you totally have a style. They're like, we can pick it out. And I'm like, I can't see it like they can see it. And I'm sure we can all see it that you can't see because we have the objectivity in that respect. But, it harkens on what Axel said, is that there's so much of this is instinct. Like there's so little time, maybe we'll touch on the Pixar work, but like there's so little time to like say, oh, I'm going to build up some ideas for this whole project, because you don't have that time, especially once you start hitting the pages. Like the pages are when it's instinct. Your gut is telling you and leading you and how you do these things. So there's very little sort of, let me just step back and look at the canvas a little more. We don't get that.
Oh man, no. I mean, by the time it always seems to me that by the time you start drawing something, it's already late anyway. And I am not fast. And I probably would be if I didn't second guess myself so much and prevaricate, and have that hatred of I'll go. It's nothing. I'll go in early days, and I'm not so guilty of it now. But I would go in and I would ink the figures. I'd do the bits I wanted to do, just to get a feeling, just get something going. But then I'd have to I'd have to go in and fill in the rest. Eventually, you've got to face it. You've got to finish stuff, and all of a sudden, the stuff I thought was really well thought through was uncertain, woolly, and it's kind of like I've got these figures stood in the way of all the other stuff I'm trying to see now, and I can't see what the fuck it is. And I hit the pages and I'm in panic mode instantly, basically,
right?
Because it's already late. It's never getting any. It's never.
Yeah.
It's always, it was a constant clarion call. You're late.
And we don't have time to sort of consult like the Alex Toth point of view from everything. Like we don't have time to like step back and go, okay, what's the thing here? And how do I make the thing, because he was him, and he could see all that stuff before he drew it. But
I also think he wouldn't have drawn the stories that I was drawing. He would have said, "I don't draw this shit. I don't like it." Right. So he would have gone back to drawing a simple cowboy story or something. He would have drawn it really beautifully. There's no doubt about it. Everything he did was amazing. Yeah, I went through a big Alex Toth kick. Where I thought, this is it. This is what I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to do my best. I even drew the book that was nearest to that was a Reed Richards thing. It was a series of books called Before the Fall, and I did a Reed Richards story with Dr. Doom was in there anyway, and it was fun stuff. It was, and it was me trying to be more stripped back, and I was enjoying it. It still got late, and I saw the color, and that ruined everything. It was just like, what is the fucking point of trying with any of this stuff? Because whatever I draw, it's just going to end up by. Ugh. Alex Toth. I've never been able to take on those. Learn to draw everything. Get rid of drawing. Get rid of the extraneous, because I can do that and then think, but I'll just put this here, and then that would look really good against this.
Right.
And if I really wanted to give it some depth, and then I'm really late again.
Yeah.
And that's me.
No, I get that. I mean, it's tough. I mean, and Mike Mignola does that as well. Like he'll draw a lot, but then he'll keep going over and over, and like black, just the blacks will creep in on all these spaces because he's like, I don't need that. I don't need that. Let me just kind of limit that. But he's on the same timeline as you or everybody
No,
else in the business. That's the difference.
no, that's true. I mean, I guess he's creative. I mean, he's got his own time scale, and I mean, he doesn't even do that anymore. I mean, he would just draw the edges of stuff now. Anyway, I think it's just like he knows it's there, but in his head, he can just pretty much just draw the edges of everything.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. He it's like whatever's in there is they're the monsters, and the only monsters you're going to see are the ones I want you to see.
Sure.
Yeah,
it's a missing world otherwise.
it is. Yeah, I'm not good at the lose it in black.
Yeah,
that was always, if I had a question for Mike, that would always be his response.
sure.
What do I do with Hellboy's tail when he's on a horseback? He says, lose it in black.
Yeah, right. Totally.
Yeah, but what if it's a white horse?
Right. Totally. So you came in interesting focus into my experience as a comic artist. I had seen Enigma, and I'm forgive me if the timings, I don't know all the specific timings, but so my studio and apartment I shared with another artist, and we were 4 or 5 blocks away from the DC offices. So we were really close by, and he did a lot of work for them, especially in the special projects division. And one day he came, and we got the comps. So we would get like everything from Vertigo, and DC came in. So that's like sort of like all your work would start rolling in that way. But one day he came home with a stack of photocopies of the California project. And so it's black and white. And we were like, what is this? Because the movie hadn't come out. So it was totally abstract, but it was this black and white artwork. And that stayed out in the studio forever. Like people will come over and they're like, what's this? Because I don't know if like really everything that you were doing for Vertigo at the time had been sort of like entrenched in everybody's mind as to what was going on. You guys were sort of like, listen, Sandman was everything, and everything else kind of like filtered down below that, Shade.
Yes, he did.
So like there was a lot of noise that you had to make to try to get attention in the Vertigo offices in that respect, or at least on the shelves. So, yeah, man, that California thing really kind of was quite the interesting, thing. And that, and then years later, people are like, oh, that never came out. Like all I know is I had the black and white thing. So for me, that was the comic. I don't even know if it had letters. I think it just might have been the artwork.
It might have been the artwork at that stage. Did I draw? Do you know? I'm trying to remember if I inked lettered pages. Do you know, they must have been lettered. It was fairly early on. It was just after finishing. So that was straight after Enigma.
Okay.
So it would have been like 94, 93, okay. 94 anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm guessing it must have been lettered. Yeah, it was an interesting one. It was. I was very surprised to be approached by special projects. And it's like, hey, there's a bump in rate as well. Great.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't tell me I wouldn't get the artwork back. Not that art sales would have been a thing back then anyway, really, I suppose. But it was interesting because it was, I think it was supposed to be Peter David was going to be adapting it initially. And I think it was Chuck Dixon.
Yeah.
He wrote the adaptation. And credit to him, he managed to compress... I can't remember how long the movie was. They sent me a VHS of it, and it was certainly over an hour and a half anyway. Mm-hmm. But it was a full movie, and he compressed it down into 40 pages. He didn't break down the page count, the panels, panels into pages or anything. That was left to me, but I thought it read pretty well. Might even have been more coherent than the movie. I'm honestly not sure. I literally watched it the one time.
Yeah.
They sent me the movie and a bunch of stills to refer to. I am terrible with photo reference anyway.
Right.
But yeah, it was an interesting exercise, certainly, to try and compress this thing down into 40 page. Well, I mean, Chuck had done it. You can write something, but it's one of those things where, of course, you can write one sentence and you could be hiding. It might be like one panel, but you could be hiding 3 panels in it. I'm sure you've encountered that one in the past.
Yep.
Where, yeah. But he was, he was a seasoned writer even then, obviously. He knew what he was doing. It worked pretty well. I probably did my adding panels into it. I did the job, and I think it came out pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I was quite intrigued to see how it'd be received when it came out. And as I understood it, the weird idea was it'd be a giveaway with the VHS tape. Which means it's going to be printed half the size of a normal book,
Right.
or at least 2/3 anyway as well. I don't know whether there was going to be a newsstand version. They didn't really keep me in the loop with these things. I mean, as usual, I was probably pushing time on it. But the next thing I knew was it was gone. And it could have been, I know Gramercy Pictures, who puts California out, they were producing the movie. They went into they crashed and burned, basically. Yeah. It was funny. A few years later, I was studying in New York, and I was around Gramercy Park, thinking, "Is Gramercy Pictures around here?" I should have found this out. I wanted to know. That book actually, the colours were started as well. I know years later, and I've got it on my hard drive somewhere, I'm sure. Danny Volzo sent me a couple of pages he'd coloured up.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was partially completed. It was a weird one. Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, the thing is, for me at that stage, the rate I work at, I was never going to be a book a month guy. I'm lucky if I'm a 3 books a year guy,
right,
or 4 books a year. Honestly, a single issue not coming out was quite a blow. It was tough. It's on the net now. Actually, if you search for it, I gave it to Tim Pilcher, who was I've known for a long time. He was Art Young's assistant when he was working out of London for Vertigo when he first joined. Right. Back basically when when Enigma joined Vertigo from Touchmark.
Mm-hmm.
Art set up his London office. Tim joined him as his assistant, and years later, I gave Tim all the copies, and he said, "Can I put it up on my blog?" And I said, "Knock yourself out. I don't think anybody's going to be arresting me now." Right. I don't think I'm busting NDAs or anything.
No, I don't think so. Brad Pitt's after you, so I think you're all right.
Yeah, I don't think Brad Pitt knows who I am. Yeah. I wonder what happened to the artwork. Well, I have no idea.
I'm thinking like it probably got boxed up, and then in the bankruptcy, like whoever like bought whatever asset ended up with this thing, and it just could be sitting in some sort of warehouse of Miramax or whatever at this point.
Yeah, it's the limbo of Raiders of the Lost Ark, isn't it? Oh, we're in the last scene.
It's right there with the Ark. Yeah, they probably put it inside the Ark.
I feel pretty good about that, but it's probably burned then, hasn't it?
Oh, that's
the Ark's judged. I've been judged from above, and it's like, what the hell is this shit?
You've been found wanting.
Yeah. Always. Yeah, by myself, if no one else.
Yeah, well, listen, if you want to check out something really, really interesting, and which probably not too many people have seen, Hunt Down the Californians with a K movie adaptation. It's cool. I mean, listen, it was great to have in the studio. It felt like we had some sort of cool artifact for quite a while.
You pretty much did, I suppose. But I'm I'm pleased that anybody was even bothered about it. It was just, yeah, that I find that quite exciting. It's nice. It had a life beyond.
It did. I mean, and it had a life beyond, especially. I mean, you know how. Listen, you know how the life of the young pros go. I mean, we're sharing every little cool thing we can get our hands on. You know, back then via fax machine, but we were like anything that was cool, we were getting copies out to everyone we could because it had to be disseminated in some fashion. Like you got to see this, that, or the other thing, and it's just one of those kind of cool elements. So you know what? It's like your Punk's 7-inch. You know what I mean? Like that, like only got a couple pressed out there, and it just made the rounds. So there you go.
Well, it could well be that it's done more good that way than it would have if it had actually been released. So.
So there's an interesting thing you were mentioning about Mike doing some layouts, when like he was trying to get his point across or what, however or lack of willingness to yield some control, which we all can respect. I know how that felt like. So I worked with Keith Giffen briefly, and so Keith delivers all his scripts. That's air quotes for everyone. On copy paper, and he would draw with a felted pen, and he would draw a 9-panel grid, and that's how you got there's your script, and you would sort of follow his rudimentary drawings with whatever copy he wrote in there, and it was an interesting process.
Yeah, I can relate totally. I mean, when I first came onto Hellboy, I received a box with. And it's all the fun stuff that I couldn't have afforded to buy at the time. The library editions up to that date and all the trades. And it was just chock full of good stuff. And the first 4 scripts for Darkness Calls. And they were all handwritten stats. And they all had thumbnails drawn on them. And that kind of freaked me out at the time because it's like, I'm used to puzzling this stuff out myself.
Right.
But the neat thing was, and I'm sure you can relate to this from what you just said, but it's like I'm looking at these thumbnails and they are perfect manula pages, and you can see exactly how they would work.
Yep.
Even as you say, rudimentary as they were drawn, you could see exactly how they would work, and even down to the black distribution, and you knew how they would read. But I could not for the life. I can say I could not. I was going to say I couldn't for the life of me translate them directly. But more to the point, it was more the problem that I was just so used to doing everything that I would always think, well, this is a starting point, and I would try and take it on board. And by increments, I would gradually probably lose what Mike had intended and make his life miserable. And, years later, I did a panel with him hosted by a mutual friend, Pete Doherty. And Pete would put up images on the screen of Mike's thumbnail scripts because I passed them on to him, and then my layouts, and then my pencils and inks, and then Mike would tell me, or he was telling the audience, he hadn't told me previously, but this is where what I meant for you to do was just spilling my water bottle there. Excuse the sound effects. What I meant was here, but you've added all these extra pieces in here, and that wasn't what I wanted. And this went on for an hour.
Yeah.
And it was an hour of being
roasted.
It really was. I mean, it was hilarious.
Oh, sure. It
was both awful and hilarious at the same time.
So he has a particular magic with spinning joy in the minor key. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, totally, yeah.
That's my experience with him,
He does that very well indeed. I got better at it. But yeah, it's hard. It is hard when you're faced with something like that. And also, it's that moment where you realise that, and I'm sure you must have encountered this disparity as well. Um, so Keith's shown you what he wanted, and you're thinking, that's great, but it's not how I would have done it.
Right.
And it's that constant battle because you've got your own intuition,
Right.
and no matter how misinformed it might be, as your own methods of telling the story. But I mean, it's just that thing. It's like, yeah, your aims are the same, but your approaches are different, and it's really hard to make the two things gel. And I could never, even the closer I skewed to what Mike drew, and it did get easier as time went on, and also he pulled back a lot more as well, and and allowed me more space. But what would work for Mike wouldn't necessarily work for me. It just simple things like those little cutaways he'll do to you're in a dark room and there are statues, there's bas reliefs carved all over the wall, everything's in deep shadow, and cuts away to a broken statue's face,
Mm-hmm.
and other details like in his work, it would read just continuity. It would be a wandering camera. It'd be a space in time. It would be just more atmosphere. But because no matter how much I tried to, add the blacks in there, to lose stuff in there, to make it simpler, it would always be more busy, and it wouldn't work. It just simply wouldn't read the same way. I think Mike's work, and it's gotten more like that as time has gone on as well. It reads so uh, so much like icons. It reads so fast.
Oh, great! Yeah.
You're right. It doesn't linger on it any longer than it needs to. But my stuff just simply has more. Just got more stuff, and it's like your eye catches on it, and I just don't think it. I just don't think it reads the same way. So even if I try to keep it exactly the same, if I try to keep the same angles, I would inevitably be pulling stuff more into a third dimension, just because that's how I think.
Yeah.
I can't help thinking in terms of trying to make a space work, whether it matters or not, because that's just how my mind works.
Yeah.
And I think there is another issue with it as well, actually, over time. I mean, even if I think to make it work exactly the same, the only thing I could have done, I mean, I was already taking on elements of Mike's work, which no one asked me to do. I mean, that was my own, I made that my own cross to bear.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to make that blend, but if I tried to strip stuff down more and more and more, I couldn't help thinking that all I was going to do was get closer to a bad pastiche
Sure.
of and it would just heighten the problems. But yeah, there were definitely those moments where I said, "It's not. I can't make this work like this. Just show me exactly what you mean." And there was definitely one of those pages where I literally took the page, finally faxed through. This is after wrestling with it for days, which is while the editor in the back was like been screaming at me how late we were. Just send it to me and I'll trace over it, and I still managed to change stuff.
Right.
Which is fucking nuts.
Well, I mean, this. I mean, it's so funny how this all ties into like our early part of our discussion in this very, on that childhood aspect of it, like where we gained our our understanding of this language at a young age, and our interpretation of this language is kind of baked in, like how we see stories, told, and also married that these challenges you faced with in this project, or doing something that it was sort of like hearkening to Kirby or even the Tom Strong stuff, is that ties in with that childhood of sitting there and trying to draw the drawing in the comic book that you like. So it's a matter of like you want to honor Kirby, you want to honor Mike, and but you don't want it to be that bad version of it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's a tightrope. And it's the weird thing is it's probably not something that anybody reading this stuff even cares about.
Right.
Um, so my thought was like, it's we'll use Hellboy as the obvious example again. I was already a fan of that book. I was a fan of Mike's,
Hmm.
and I was worried about, well, when it was initially announced that Liva Mayo was going to be drawing it. Um, I'm sure everybody had the same reaction of, oh, I'm disappointed that Mike's not going to draw this because it's just,
It's him.
it's him. Yeah, it's not. This isn't a Hellboy book with interchangeable artists. It mattered, and there's no slight on Lee at all. Lee's a very accomplished artist.
Yeah, yeah.
He's great. He's a nice guy as well. So it's nothing about that at all. Um, so when it came to me, my thought was like, you know, I knew I knew what my reaction had been, so I knew I was letting myself in for a world of hurt potentially,
Hmm.
by taking it on. Um, I was going to go on to another point about this completely. What the hell? Anyway, whatever. I did it, and I just figured, like I couldn't not do it.
Hmm.
You just have to go. You just have to go with. I think it's hard to see things any other. Yeah, things. What you said about like the way you see things as a child, and I think a lot of the way you read books, um, key. You can't imagine them drawn any other way.
Yeah,
And I don't think it matters what age you are. I think you go back to being a child. It is because you are allowing. It's like you read a book. You're allowing yourself to be taken on that journey, much like being led by somebody else by the hand through that story. And if all of a sudden you're being pulled along that story and things changed around you, you would be like, "What the hell's going on around here?
sure.
I don't like this."
Well,
And you think like, well, I've got to take somebody else down that journey now. So
uh,
I don't want them to have that feeling. This is not the point I was going to make. My mind, I'll come back to it if I remember.
yeah. Well, I think so. And I say this repeatedly, but like I really feel our essence of ourself gets baked in by the age of 12. Like what we love by the age of 12 we're gonna love it forever. And I mean, and over your right shoulder, I believe is an example of that being the Millennium Falcon. Like, like these things get locked into us, and we're going to hold on to whatever joys and magic that we found in these years leading to that, and we're going to keep going back into that well and pulling things out and going, okay, how do I bring that into this? How do I express this feeling?
Yeah, for better or worse.
Well, sure. Right. But like to that point, like you were saying, like things change. I mean, like it's that experience when you saw the updated, revised, original Star Wars movie when they added all the special effects. That cool, but I'm like, it doesn't feel right. It feels wrong. Like it felt like, why am I unsettled by this? Like, and it's not change is bad. It's just like it was fine. Like we don't need to go back and finish something that was already done. Like it's a thing, you know.
Yeah, you don't need that level of revisionism. You don't. I was excited. Yeah, I remember with Star Wars, with the special editions and everything. I was excited with seeing the CGI X-wing fighters, and I think as much as anything else, it was the excitement about uh, just the idea of the technology. But I mean, I remember what really bugged me at the time was like, well, you went and changed all that, but that was already fine. Why didn't you go and fix those lightsabers flickering on and off? They were the things that really bugged me. That because it was more, X-wing fighters are hardware. I love X-wing fighters, but they're
Yeah,
hardware. They look great as models, and I love the originals. But the lightsabers, and I'm kind of sick to death of lightsabers now, if I'm honest. But back then, there were very few lightsabers. There were two lightsabers, three lightsabers at
yeah,
most. And to see them flickering on and off, and you could see the stick within or whatever. It was kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, just fix that, because it's like there's a literal human connection. There's a hand holding that lightsaber,
Yeah.
and that hand holding that lightsaber is that connection between the two things is magical. And so fix that, because the mechanical stuff works fine as it is. And do you know, I don't think I'd even identified the problem with this, thinking about it until right at this moment. But that really was it. It really bugged me with the special editions. You didn't fix those, but you fix all this other stuff that looked absolutely fine.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it was crazy. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, Star Wars is one of those things that's it stayed with me
Oof.
for
Yeah.
for I was going to say for better or worse. It's always for better.
Yeah.
If I just keep in mind the original and my how I felt about it as a kid. I mean, it was transformational as comics certainly were.
Yeah.
And I remember the British reprints of the Chaikin stuff coming out, and thinking like this, the comic version. This is the best thing ever. Comics and a movie that I'm obsessed about, all in one thing.
Yep.
And as something new to obsess about. Why don't these things look the same? What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Broken brain thinking.
It was, yeah.
And that, yeah.
It was exciting. I mean, I think, there was that interesting period, that post 77 period where there's just this fusion with comics. You would get these sort of like Star Wars comic, Kiss comic, Micronauts toys comic. Like there was this kind of like, they were really putting all this stuff into the comic books at the end of the 70s and it was an exciting time. You're like, oh my gosh, like it's all about comic books, and it was a very strange, which it wasn't, but it was for my little tiny brain at the time. So I was happy.
No, I understand that thinking completely. And I think I probably, even just going back to California, I think I almost felt like that connection even then.
Mm-hmm.
There was something about that. I've literally just cleared out, and a lot of people would be horrified to hear about it. I've cleared out most of my comics. They've been stuck in long boxes. I've never been really a collector,
Right.
but there was stuff I had accumulated, and I just cleared them all out. And some of the things I havered over in the end were odd movie adaptations, because precisely because of that connection.
Yeah.
It's just that stuff, the stuff that meant everything then. I think my problem is now, it's like I have this disparity between the stuff that meant so much to me as a kid and how I feel about comics in general now. There's a big gap in between.
Yeah.
And I mean, it has been for a while, and this is not a man, I hate comics kind of statement, but there was a moment of ambivalence that crept in and never quite went away.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as, I can't see comics the same way anymore. I still enjoy the process of making them, or the idea of making them. I enjoyed making them up to a certain point. Finishing them as another the interminable problem.
Yeah.
But it takes going back to the early stuff to remind myself what the hell the point was in the first place. I don't, it's a firework. It's light blue touch paper and retired to a safe distance. That blue touch paper was always burning. The distance, that was the problem.
Right.
I'm not sure if that entirely makes sense, but it was, yeah. I think it's like it was always burning, always exploding early on, if that makes sense. That's a weird fucking metaphor. I'm not sure where that came from. Yeah. These days, fireworks are a lot safer and they don't burn so well, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They may have a pill for that. It's
Oh my God. That's not where I was going with that.
I know you weren't. Yeah, I mean, but it's I was talking with James Robinson about this sort of similar subject, and the idea that like we're not 20 something anymore. Like we have to really find ways to keep ourselves energized and engaged in our work, because the things that like I sit and I write prose, and it takes a lot of energy to sit and write prose because there's a lot of damn words. It's not just, but drawing is a lot of damn lines, so you have to like find that thing that makes you say, and it can be just as much as being grateful for having the privilege to do it. Like I'm so lucky that I get to do this. That's a great thing. But it's tough. And like, how do you keep yourself sort of emotionally engaged, or however you find yourself to be engaged?
I think it always comes down to the story ultimately.
Yeah.
I mean, engaging with, the stuff, the things we get nostalgic about, that's a burning totem that you always come back to.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to, because that's why that's why you are where you are. And it casts a light on what you're doing now, ultimately. And I think it's like, I mean, as you say, with writing the prose, I can only imagine the work involved. And the only way you get through it is you've got to love what it is you got to love the thing you're writing about at that time, because otherwise, how are you going to sustain it?
Mm-hmm.
And the only way, it's kind of like, I'm not sure about this. I'm skidding off the surface. And the only way of dealing with it, I think, is you have to go deeper. It's like it's not you can't skirt around it, around the subject. You can't kind of write a book. You've got to write a fucking book.
Yeah.
And the only way of doing that is stepping off the cliff. It's like being on the edge, looking down at what could be. It doesn't do it, and you can linger on that cliff, that precipice, as long as you like, but you know in your heart of hearts, ultimately, no matter how long you wait, you're gonna have to step over and give into the process, and that process is going to be hard. It's going to kick the crap out of you at the end of the day. You've got you have to engage with the thing. You have to be emotional about it. I think I'm sure there are writing processes, as there are drawing processes, where you can get through the day, do what you do, you keep on doing it regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that at least you've been at the chipping away at that coal face. But until you actually really feel it, until you get through to the point of what it is you're actually trying to get over, that you're not really going to make progress on it.
Yeah.
And I think writing is the same as drawing. It's like, it's the acceptance of it's just hard. It's gonna take you're gonna have to draw that really awkward fucking perspective that you visualize, that made you want to draw a particular scene in the first place. Because if you don't draw it, you're gonna let yourself down. You've got to feel engaged. I went through a whole period of trying to make things easier on myself. It was I say a period, various periods where I've tried to get like, okay, don't go for the complicated thing, go for the simple thing. What's the easiest way I can do this? And I get to the end of a page, look back at it, and I just hate it, because I know that what I had in mind, my initial reaction, was so much stronger. And yes, it's going to take longer. It's going to take more work, but go with it, because there's a reason you liked the idea, that complicated idea. There's a reason you liked that in the first place, and it describes what you're doing so much better. I mean, if you're going to draw a comic, why would you draw around something?
Sure.
It's a visual medium. You want to show stuff to people.
Yeah.
So you do the difficult thing. and hate yourself for it for every minute you have to do it, because you know that it's like, X artist wouldn't do this; they'd think of a different way of doing it. But you know, if it's in your head and it's plaguing you all that way through doing the easier version or something, you might as well have just and it slows you down because all you do is you draw versions and go, no, that
I
one's rubbish as well. I might as well just do the hard version.
Yeah, save the time of the second guessing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, going back to what you said about reading a comic twice, right at the beginning of the conversation, even then, I was thinking about I was thinking about reading scripts, and I try not to read a script with a pencil in hand.
Oh, that's
I try and remove.
Yeah.
Well, because I try not to interrupt the flow of it, but it's an absolute bitch because as I'm reading, it's playing out like a freaking movie in my head.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know I'm going to have that experience again, whether it's right or wrong.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
I can totally.
What do you do with that?
No, I know. I can, because I can remember back that, getting the script, reading it. And I think, that mix of excitement of like, I can't wait to get to this because I'm really excited about this project. That's sort of like that distracted behavior of drawing in the margins of that script immediately, because all these pictures start flooding in, but the idea of that practice of not allowing yourself that to be able to engage with the actual work of the script versus the visual execution of that script.
It's hard.
Oof.
It's really hard because the trouble is, it's like it's your initial reaction, and it's like if you don't make a note, are you going to have that same reaction to it again? Because it could be a one-time reaction where you have that purely visceral reaction to a storyline playing out, and it's not always that clear. It's not. Let's face it.
Yeah.
It's scripts differ wildly, but sometimes it's just there, and and apart from anything else, you're thinking, how the fuck am I going to roll that? How the hell am I going to do it? And it's in. You're trying to just keep it out of your mind, just focus on the story. But it's like on another level, it's all these. You've got the naysayer in there saying like, well, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, and you've got the screening going on at the same time, and it's a lot of noise. And this is exactly how comics are made anyway, isn't it? Because it's like if you actually stop to break down exactly what it is you did to make a page, to make a story, it's one of the things you try to describe that process to people. You find yourself interrupting yourself, thinking like, well, I'm not just drawing stuff. I'm actually also I'm also costume designing. I'm also lighting this. There's a hairstylist in there. There's set dressings going on, and all this shit is going on. It's not all just coming from you. Obviously, it's coming from the script as well. That it's that moment of building. It happens the moment you start reading. And I find it impossible to stop doing that. It'd be really useful if you could just say, okay, I'll step down the brain, the process, just for initial read through, so I can just comfortably read it and go, what the hell happened there, and then go back and do that.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think around it, because the image I get in my head is as you were saying, with all the jobs you're doing, I mean, it really is like the whole crew comes rushing into the soundstage when you start reading the script. But I wonder if it was such an interesting experiment. Like, could you have somebody read the script to you? So you would not be able to like visually engage with the words and just hear the story. And would that be a different kind of connection?
I could probably get just have it read by the computer, so it actually
Oh, yeah.
cuts out the inflection as well.
No, for sure.
Yeah, maybe that might work. Although um, I'm not sure how well it would work with Mike's great for typos. It's not as bad since it improved. It improved once you started writing them on a computer. When he'd write them longhand, and they were just statted. There's lots and lots of crossings out, and I can remember there were multiple versions of one word, and none of them was spelt right because his mind was working too fast as well. He was already even obviously has his scripting. I mean, he'd probably scripted it first with the thumbnail because that's how
Oh,
we
yeah,
saw the story.
of course.
It was image first for him, and then write and then writing it out. But damn it, writing takes way too long.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of funny.
That's
Even now, when I get his scripts, I will go through and I'll format them so that I can get just a single page on a sheet of paper if possible, with space so I can scribble thumbnails on that same sheet. But I will do corrections as well because otherwise I'm reading these same typos time and time again. It drives me nuts.
It drives me little bonkers. Yeah. Well, maybe we should get a crowdfunding thing up to get Mike a subscription to Grammarly. Maybe we can. I think the comic book community might get behind that one just for your sake.
I think that'd be just one more thing to drive him nuts as well.
Yeah, well,
I can already do that well enough. So
listen, anything to drive him a little crazier will be fine by me. So like in like thinking about like when you're going through a script, like you kind of talked about it earlier, touching on the difference between how Mike sees a story, how you see a story, and like with Keith seeing a story and my seeing a story, because I'm comparing myself with you. Is that like I would say like distinct, like in a distinctive fashion, like you think volumetrically, that like there's a very like there is distance, like Walt Simonson thinks volumetrically. There's space on that page in a dimension that isn't afforded with a flat sheet of paper. And the other aspect that I always attributed with you was what I would call like a dynamic moving camera. Like that's like how and like the only other artist who, I ideally also is sort of in some really strange way similar with you was JP. So like John Paul had that same sort of kind of like camera eye, and not to mention the same bloody struggle with, fighting himself to the end of the page.
It meant be mentioned in the same sense as JP is I mean that's pretty cool anyway. Love his work. That was a blow. Actually that kind of just threw me. I kind of forgot where you started with that.
Well,
about JP. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I'm the idea is
like, volumetric.
Yeah. And camera movement and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I do. I probably do think I automatically think, I suppose filmically would be the simplest way of describing it, I suppose. I think of the frame as being like the camera eye and moving the camera around the subject.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do a lot. I think I used to do a lot of it on I think of a lot of. I'd use it a lot on Vertigo's books. A lot of the early Vertigo books, just because an awful lot of them were they tended to be quite talky. I just anything to keep it interesting, to keep it moving. I don't like things to be static, because otherwise it's already a drawing. Mm-hmm. I don't need to be reminded it's a drawing. The comics I liked had movement, either camera was moving or the figures were moving within them, and anything that gave a sense of energy, kinetic energy, movement within the frame, anything you could do to do that was good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be I probably overused it initially, and I'd make characters overact. Just a little too theatrical,
Yeah.
a little too stagey. But it was about anything to try and get some sort of movement on the page, whether it was the characters, actors moving, or the camera around them, or a combination between. And it's not easy. It's not, because you've got a limited number of panels to do that, and it's like you can't keep on adding panels ad nauseum.
Right.
That waylays madness, clearly. But I can't remember specifically why it became interesting. It must simply have just come down to a combination of whichever artist's work I was responding to at the time, and it's never one specifically. It's always a combination.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I mean, I like. I can't help but think of stuff that way. I'm sure I could probably make things a lot simpler by thinking of it as a frame as being like a proscenium arch, and everything that plays within it happens from an angle, and you move within it.
It's blocked.
Everything moves within it rather than you move around it.
Yeah, right.
But the problem with that is, I think, that it keeps you as a viewer at a distance all the time.
Yeah.
And you want to get in close sometimes. You want it's like, what's the subjective view that's going to emphasize the emotional qualities of that scene? What can you do to plus what the dialogue is doing? You're not trying to just reproduce. You're trying to. It's always about plus. It's image plus dialogue at the end of the day. Image plus text. It's 1 plus 1 equals 3, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for that combinational magic, which is the thing that I guess that's the thing I realized I liked in comics, and I think it's the thing that I don't know, Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons did lots in Watchmen, lots of Alan Moore books actually, and lots of the books that I liked. It's that thing where you realise there's text and subtext, and I know what we do to get. I have that super text, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's what can you do to enrich the experience. All that shit takes time, though, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and of course, as we said, like there's no once the the button's pressed, you're late, and then it's a matter of like instinct is so like it's all instinct. It really is all instinct. That greatness of thinking happens when you are instinctually responding to the script in the thumbnailing process.
Yeah, I think so.
And then
I think so. It's trusting that's the hard thing.
You have to kind of trust whatever you're feeling, and I mean, you're gonna do all these sub windows around that that page thumbnail and go, well, maybe I can change the angle here or whatever the little shapes are. But like that's where that trust has to come in yourself, and then you go to the next phase, and then you just second guess all your line work.
Yeah, why stop at the beginning? Continue to second guess right until the very end.
Right.
In fact, and beyond, because let's face it, something can be published dead and buried for like 20 years, and you're still bothered about it. It never goes away because you're still questioning the choices you made.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
No, well, I mean, listen, we talked about it. George Lucas redoing his movies. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, they're his toys, so he can still go back and play with them. Unlike the work that we do for hire, it's gone, and which is a great thing because we can't do it. We can't go back and fix these things, and we can only move forward.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Yeah.
Do you feel
I'll get there eventually.
Yeah. Do you feel the exercise of working with the very reductive approach of Mike's work as the visualizer of this has been an interesting experiment for you as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, it was just simply. I mean, it was fulfilling just to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the crazy thing was, I mean, the book I was about to draw when I was offered Hellboy was I made a decision that I was just going to go all open line work because I was rubbish at spotting blacks.
Okay.
And you know, I was thinking, oh, yeah, I don't need to do this anymore. If I design it like this from the start, this'll be fine.
Right.
And then I get the call about Hellboy, and that kind of went out the window, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been good. It's been I've yeah, I mean, I've probably learned to tame some of my wilder tendencies, I think, to a degree. Um, yeah, you know, I don't think I can judge this. I really can't. It's like I can't look at my stuff and be objective.
Right.
I tried to read. I actually did try to read um, Hellboy through from the beginning as a fan again. It was a year or two back, and because this was the worst thing about um, working on the Hellboy was I wasn't able to enjoy it purely as a fan anymore,
Right.
and I got so much out of that book. And I thought, okay, it's been a few years. Let's have a few drinks and let's read through from the beginning. And I loved it.
Yeah.
And I managed to get about halfway through Darkness Calls when I had to stop again.
Okay.
And then I skipped all of my stuff and went straight onto Hellboy in Hell and loved it again.
Okay.
It's just, you know, I just can't be subjective about it. I can't judge it in any useful way.
Right.
I can see, other than to tell you all the shit I did wrong. I couldn't tell you the stuff I did right.
That's baked in.
Yeah, but you know, it's kind of is what it is. I mean, we left it a few years, and it's like just before the last movie adaptation came out. I did a one shot with Mike called The Beast of Argu, and that was just fun.
Mm-hmm.
All the way through, and I could just enjoy that for what it was. It wasn't part of the main storyline. It was just it was a single issue with a longer story and a short story in it, and that was great. It was I could be a lot more objective about it, and I think maybe it's just because it was out of the main storyline.
Okay.
That Mike was more relaxed about it. No layouts at that stage, obviously.
Okay.
It was just a different experience. It was a different experience, and it's been like that actually for Giant Robot Hellboy as well. I continue to make rods for my own back, making things difficult for myself because that's what I do. But it's a different Hellboy simply. So I've actually been able to enjoy it more. It's been hard because I just left it so long since between drawing books.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot how freaking hard it is to draw a book. I forgot, you know, it's what you said, going back to what you're saying about writing.
Yeah.
It's just, and the precipice I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
I was standing on as I was on that damn precipice again. And it's like, it's the willingness to dash yourself on the rocks below.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to completely step off. And just give into it. And once and you know it hurt, but then you're back in the process again, thinking, "Oh, this is not so bad. This is not so bad." And then you get to a page and you go, "My God, this is so bad. This is terrible. This is the worst thing ever."
Why did I?
Because there's always at least one page like that.
Yeah.
But you know, it's I think Yeah, I don't think I'll ever get perspective on working with Mike on that core Hellboy story, just
Sure.
because it's that main thing, and I, that is all in my head.
Well,
How, of course it is. It can't be in anybody else's head, can it?
sure. I mean, yeah, I hope not. I mean, but that's the thing. Like our own performance is, aided or inhibited by our own mind. Like we are constantly having to like gin up some sort of like, fortitude and, bravado to kind of get through the things that we, normal, regular, sane people will go, fuck no. Like, and we have to kind of go, oh, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this. I have to do this. And we, and you plow forward. One thing I was thinking about with this, and like, I guess maybe why I was asking the question about, the working from his layouts, is it sort of similar to that earlier part of the talk about, an inker inking you, and how that, like, so you can see something different in your work and kind of move and take that with you. And this is sort of front loading it versus end loading it, is that Mike being a visualist first, then a writer, that informs your storytelling and your art choices. And then, like, is that compartmentalized in that world for you as a visualist, or is it something you say, I'm taking this stuff and putting it in my toolbox and I'm going to move forward?
It depends what what part of the process I was in, actually, or how far along. Actually, literally how far along in books. Gradually, I mean, it changed over. It did change over time. Mike would he gradually stopped doing the layouts, but I could still see he'd drawn them from the script.
Mm-hmm.
The way he was describing the script,
Right.
the way he was writing the script, I could see that he was looking at the thumbnail he'd already drawn.
Yeah.
And I think actually specifically the one example I mentioned, and you can find it in one of the library editions, I think the second library edition of, it must have been the work in the Storm and the Fury. It was in the Fury part. There's one page in there, and he wasn't thumbnailing by then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a lot of issues on. And I knew this was precisely the problem. I knew he had drawn a thumbnail for himself, and I knew he had a very specific image in mind.
Yeah.
And so I was drawing multiple layouts, and I knew that they just weren't matching up to what he had already drawn.
Oh.
And it was batshit crazy. It really was. It's don't make me just draw this stuff again. Just show me what you were thinking.
Right.
It was literally that. But I think he was allowing. I mean, it must have been hard for Mike because he can't help thinking this stuff through.
Yeah.
He was allowing a lot more latitude between what he was asking for and what I was giving him. But there were specific moments
Mm-hmm.
where it was just gonna be, no, that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
And my attitude was always, and it didn't matter at the beginning or at the end, it's like, this is your book, Mike. It's fine. I'll do whatever you need.
Mm.
It was only ever a problem when time was screaming at me, or the editor was screaming at me, that we were running out of time. Thinking, well, you can see the conversation that's going on here.
Yeah.
You know exactly why this has gotten a week later, and a week later beyond that. But it was the way it was. Now, there were probably things I inherently think of that make me think of Hellboy that I would automatically draw.
Okay.
I try not to repeat stuff because I don't like that much either. It's useful if a story demands repeats,
Mm-hmm.
just to give you a sense of the frisson in the story, repeating motifs. But if you feel like you're repeating yourself, then you're boring yourself. and I don't like being bored. I get bored and distracted very easily as well. It's not a good combination.
No, I
Of
not
insane detail and getting bored.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll head in a certain direction, but I'll be doing my own thing as well.
Yeah.
Mike seems happy enough with it all, so I think we found ground that works.
Good balance.
Yeah. I'm sure if it was a specific enough story that Mike wanted done in a certain way, he'd draw layouts again, or he might just even draw it himself these days.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great because I could buy a book and I could enjoy it as a fan.
Something to look forward
to.
Yeah,
Absolutely. This is the stuff that keeps you going at the end of the day. But yeah, it's we I suppose now it's kind of like between worlds, really, but not worrying about it overly.
Yeah. Do you fancy the idea of writing your own stuff?
I talked about it for years, and I never get off my ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do so much extra in the stuff I do already anyway, that it seems almost superfluous. It's still there in the back of my mind, but I've made the odd note of things before and come back to it and just cringed with embarrassment afterwards, thinking, geez, I'm not doing that.
Well, it's tough because, you were talking about, like, we were mentioning the idea of like kind of going back and the sort of the dread of rendering or finishing the thing. I wonder if there's a bit of that in the mind where if you wrote it, like, all the images are going to come in your head, and then you're going to have to say, now I have to draw all this stuff. Like, there's kind of there might be a bit of that additional layer of overlapping that may be like, oh God, no.
Yeah, a little bit. I can remember years ago, went to get a bite to eat in the middle of the day, left the drawing board behind, sat there with my wife having a beer and food, and it was lovely. It was a beautiful day. We were eating, drinking, sun was shining, and we came up with a batshit story between us, and it was fun. I'd never really done that before, and we get to the end of the meal, and the last bit's drunk, and said, "Yeah, but man, I don't want to draw this. It sounds way too much work."
Right.
Because it already, in my head, it's half there, and I can see what it needs.
Right.
And I won't, I'm an idiot. I won't cheat. I won't choose the easy camera angle that doesn't show the view onto the street as well.
Yeah.
I think this is the problem. I won't. If there's a little bit of added production value, or any production value available from turning the camera around and seeing the location from a different angle or something, I will do it. And I'll do it knowing that I'm actually not that good at doing that necessarily.
Right.
Because I'd want to see it if I was reading it.
Right.
It's hard to see it any other way. I don't know. Maybe it may well be that I'd come up with finally the minimalist thing I've wanted to draw all my life if I sat down to write something, but I really, really doubt it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I find entire new avenues to research, and I'd have to wonder whether it'd ever get finished written, let alone drawn.
It's tough if it's not your natural thing. You know what I mean? Like, the drawing is natural, so you will kind of do it, reflexively. So, like, making yourself write, and I'm speaking, from experience. It is not a natural thing for me. My natural thing is pencil in hand, making marks on a piece of paper, and maybe 2 decades of being a designer kind of broke a little bit of that for me. That allowed me to sit and look at a keyboard as not the enemy, but something I can use.
Right. Yeah. I am going to have to just try it at some point. I know I am.
I love to see it. I mean, the reason I say this is that I think that, like, we're because we had this visual sort of earliness that we say in the comic book business is writer, artist, letterer, colorist. So we channel ourselves. We go, well, I'm that guy. That's what I do. And it's, we can do other things,
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true, actually. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things I mean, it's not a breakout of drawing so much, but doing, stepping out and doing doing storyboard stuff, I found it's not a revelation from the point of view of you're still doing drawings, a sequence of drawings in whatever form, but just breaking the needs of finishing a page. It was a revelation from that point of view.
Yeah.
And it was, it was something I thought about doing years ago before Hellboy, actually. Moving, trying to segue from comics into storyboard. I had no idea how. I had no contacts for such a move, but I had a feeling that it might suit me better in some ways. And I can remember talking to other artists about it at the time, oddly enough, actually. And one of the things mentioned was like, well, why would you want to do that? Because you don't get your name on it. It's I like comics because I get my name on it. And it's like, well, I'm not that bothered about that anymore, really. It's kind of like that novelty. It's nice, but that novelty doesn't work the same way anymore. But I liked the idea of the storytelling, solving storytelling issues. But I didn't necessarily like finishing pages.
Right.
And I could see a point to that. And years later, when I finally got to try it, sure enough, I mean, apart from the initial flailing of like, what the hell am I doing? How did I end up in this situation?
Yeah.
I'm a complete pretender. Just because I've seen a few DVD making ofs and have a few art books with bits of storyboard in the back. I know nothing about camera focal lengths or anything like that. I've got no idea about how cameras actually really work or
Right.
anything. But just the process of just putting, for me, rough marks down and saying it was finished, even if I had to go over iterating different versions of it and realizing, oh, hang on, it's not wrong. I'm just giving alternatives. That was a learning experience as well. And stepping back and saying, hey, look, I'm not doing comics and the world didn't end.
Right.
Just to bring it back to where we were coming from.
Yeah.
That was the thing. It was like it was great. It was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
And also the point of realizing I couldn't say, hey, I'm working Monday to Friday. It doesn't matter how much I've got done in there. I'm still getting paid whatever I've fucking done.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That was and all of a sudden bits of roof got fixed on the house, and and just from a purely remunerative point of view, that was a revelation. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, just it was good just to break. It's not entirely breaking the process, like I say. It's still storytelling, but it's not the be all and end all. It doesn't have to. No one's. I mean, these days people do get to see storyboards, of course. Back in the day, it was rare for anybody to see this stuff. But just being able to do something, being part of something else, and part of a process that was actually kind of nice, rather than just thinking just the tyranny of a finished page, a finished book.
Yeah,
which is something I battled. I still battle my way through these things, but so I'm obstinate in nothing else.
Right, but that's good. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you weren't battling, then you're not seeking. Like, I mean, I think that's
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. I could have made it a little bit easier.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
But the reality of it is, that's me saying it. Of course, I couldn't have made it any easier. It's still me.
Right.
Without a complete, without having my head sorted by somebody else, like scoop out my brain, take out the shit that doesn't work, put it all back together, and let's make comics.
Right.
Comics are fun.
Yay.
I've never had that button that says comics are fun all the time.
Yeah.
It's just like, comics. Gosh, this is fucking hard.
It's work. It's work.
It is work. It is work.
Real work.
Yeah.
It's very hard work. And, it's this interesting work that we are emotionally drawn to, like the things in the arts, we are emotionally drawn to it. So we will suffer through the process because we're so invested in the hope and the dream of the thing. So we'll keep going. And that's our own doing. Yeah,
it is. It is because because that's why you did it in the first place, because you read something that blew your mind and thought, well, I can kind of do that. I mean, it's like, if I can do something like that I'd like to blow some minds. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Not realizing that in the process, you're going to cut off that part of yourself that can physically enjoy it so much for yourself forevermore.
Yeah, you sacrifice to transmute that into the thing. Like that's what you throw on the altar, I guess, in some sense, is that little thing. Yeah,
I think so. I find it very hard to get that same enjoyment out of actually reading books these days.
Yeah,
it's not. I'm not saying I don't at all, but it's just they're
different. It's a different thing. Like I'll see something, like obviously any of like Sean and Ed's stuff on the Reckless stuff. I'm looking at my bookshelf. I'm saying this, and you get these kind of things, like what Tom King and Greg Smallwood did on The Human Target was really great.
Oh yeah, no, it's lovely stuff. Yeah,
and you go, okay, cool. Yeah. Like that's not what we grew up on. It's a very different monster, and it's wonderful.
It is,
and I think we're fortunate for having that in our lives, that sort of sophistication and maturity that we go, oh, okay, well, like, this is what I would have with a cocktail, like we're an adult now,
Yeah, no, absolutely. You take it where you can get it. I mean, I'm probably, there's probably a lot of books I have enjoyed as much, but it's impossible to read them the same way. I think that's what it comes down. It's very rare you actually gain that much momentum, or I gain that much momentum while I'm reading something, to not be aware on it on that other level of seeing it as a creator as well, which is a little bit frustrating. It's the advantages of watching a movie, because the thing is, it's going to move. It's relentless, regardless of whether you're ready for it. That movie is going through its timeline. Yeah. It started and it will finish, and you're there for the duration, however you deal with it.
Yeah.
If it's a car chase, it means I'm going to fall asleep. So that's how I deal with it. But with a comic, and it's a comic, you control that speed, and, it's easy to stall at a certain point because your mind's working on, it's processing it in a different way, because you're seeing that comic through your own experiences, and it's bloody frustrating at times. Yeah,
I'm going through a period right now. If I am rewatching, when I say rewatching, I really am like rewatching all the films that were out and on television, like on the weekends when I was growing up in the 70s. So all these movies that I probably shouldn't have been watching or should not have been on television for a 10-year-old, I'm rewatching these things as an adult, and just marveling at the sophistication of this genre, of film, the filmic, qualities that happened in the 70s that, are long past. And it's been a great sort of exploratory process in story for me as, an adult now.
They're going to be a lot more raw, aren't they, at the end of the day? I mean, they're not going to be special effects extravaganzas for the most part, are they?
Yeah.
So you're very much more aware of the edit and and if there's dialogue there, it's pared down, it's sparse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool.
and slow.
Yeah, but they're only an hour and a half long. They're never longer
That's
than
true.
90 minutes. So you're like, even if it's a clunker, the investment is really quite short. So I'm all in. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no, I should do that. Even just go, even dialing it forward and just looking at all the I don't know. I'd probably have to start with something like Jason and the Argonauts, and then go to Star Wars and
Right.
and then watch through all the Spielbergs and whatever, all the stuff that got me really, really excited.
Yeah.
I was already into old black and white science fiction stuff and whatever, old genre stuff. But yeah, I could probably do with revisiting all that stuff actually. And,
yeah, I won't make my wife go through the cruddy stuff. Like I'll watch Fantastic Voyage on my own, but you know, I loved that.
Yeah, do you know, I was looking at that for reference earlier.
I loved that movie. It was so fun.
It was good.
Yeah. So one thing that you said earlier, and you were talking about stuff, and it made me think about in the terms of process. And one of the greatest things that I gained in understanding process was when I stumbled into teaching, and I took over Dave Johnson's drawing class, which then led to me teaching design and advertising classes for a school, which they should all have their head examined for actually even allowing me to do that. But what it did is it allowed me to, they would ask questions and I had to answer their questions. So I had to take apart my process, which I didn't even know I had a process. You know, as you said, hairstylist, costume designer, all the typographer, like all these things you have to do to make a page happen are all these skill sets that you have to bake in. And I was answering all these very specific typography and design and, you know, composition questions. And so I would have to break my process down to explain to them how you get to these sort of these conclusions. And the reason I say it is like, invest, if you have the opportunity, definitely investigate that. Like teach a master class of something just for a weekend to people, and you will learn so much about what you take for granted, but you will be able to look at it with objectivity when you engage with it.
I can see that actually. That as you were describing it, yeah, I would. Oh man, that'd be I can see how it'd be illuminating and also a nightmare.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but
I might have to. I have been asked a fair few times, and it's not something I've done till now. It's the sort of thing I'm happy to talk to people one-on-one.
Yep.
Specifically, but en masse,
yeah,
I can just. Too many conflicting questions. I can just imagine being reduced to a puddle at the end of the day.
Yeah, and listen, I love talking, but my initial reaction to crowds is I turn bright red. Like that's just
yeah.
I have that sort of that bit of me, that 8-year-old in me who got embarrassed for whatever the reason was, and I still will get nervous and turn bright red. But after a point, then that kind of falls away, and then it's just at that point you're reacting, to the questions. And I don't know. I mean, I can't encourage it enough with the creative growth in all of us to take that and turn it into something else.
I can totally see the point. I mean, it was, yeah. I mean, just simply as a way of understanding where your own head is and what you actually really believe. Because all this stuff is, I mean, otherwise all these that process it's internalized. It's so many things happening all at once.
Yeah.
And how I can only imagine the absolute horror that the responses, your responses were met with. Like, well, how can you hold that idea and this idea simultaneously?
Right.
How does that work? Well, it's not just that; it's this idea as well, and also it's not just that page; it's the page before and the page afterwards, and what goes beyond. It's it's kind of ridiculous. I watched. I spent a little bit of time watching an editor watch when I was doing storyboarding on the Star Wars, and I watched what he was doing, and a lot of the time he was speaking out loud about what he was doing and requesting particular cuts to be emptied into his bin, and he knew every cut that was available, and just seeing his process, because he was talking out loud, talking to himself, requesting stuff, seeing all this happen at once, and then seeing all these clips appear on screen and reordering them, moving stuff around was kind of amazing. I mean, it was a more basic version, I suppose, of I'm not going to remember the Spielberg movie now, am I? Minority Report.
Oh, yeah.
Moving all the pieces around.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, which is everybody's fantasy. Let's be creative.
Yes.
Let's wave our arms around and magic will happen, and I'll have a deeper understanding of everything, which would be great.
Wouldn't that be?
But it was just fascinating watching him do this, and then realizing I had to get on with my own work, of course. But just seeing it all this stuff externalized,
Yeah.
and he's playing with time on the screen.
It
was mind blowing.
There's a series, and if you've seen it, you can stop me now, but it's called Every Frame a Painting. And it's a series that was no longer happening, but it was on YouTube, and you can watch it. They're average about 8 minutes long, and they were produced by an editor from Vancouver. And I think there's maybe, I don't know, 30 of these videos. And so they're not long, but man, they go into Kurosawa, Spielberg. I mean, all these amazing film directors, and breaking down what they're doing and why they're doing it, and the framing and the lighting. And it is, I mean, like I said, I don't draw that much anymore, but I watch this stuff maybe once a year just so I can glean a little bit more mojo of storytelling from these things. So I'll forward you the link.
I've got a feeling I've seen a couple of those before, actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm going to have to, that does sound good, actually. I'm going to have a look at that.
Yeah.
It's just worth it just for recharging batteries.
Yeah. Yeah, in anything we do, I think it's just a matter of not to mention physicality, keeping yourself as physical as you can be, because sitting at a chair is not good for our bodies all day long, and and our minds and all this stuff. It's had we known that when we were in our 20s, we'd probably be in much finer shape, but this is how it goes. Why don't we, dude, I could probably keep talking with you for hours, and I don't want to impose any more time on you. Let's talk a little bit, just give the overview of the new Hellboy book, and then we'll just kind of tie things up after that.
New Hellboy book, Giant Robot Hellboy. Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what I can really say about it. There's a little preview out there already. Hellboy, taken by scientists, put into a virtual reality of some sort, wakes up in the body of a giant version of himself. What the hell's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And that is pretty much the premise of the book. Mad scientist, Hellboy in a machine, wakes up as a robot, crap happens. And it's just a lot of fun. And I know let's talk about Mike doing his homage to kaiju movies, even though he's never really watched them, and I've not really watched them much either.
Right.
To me, my reference point was Jason and the Argonauts, the scene with Talos coming to life, which is one of those things I saw so many times as a kid. I mean, all the Ray Harryhausen stuff, but it was always Jason and the Argonauts. That moment when the Argonauts come out. Is it Perseus? I want to say Perseus. Not Perseus. Can't remember. And Hercules come out the bases of the statue of Talos. Look up this huge statue towering above them, and Talos turns his head and looks down, and it blows my mind. I'm getting shivers even thinking about it now. and just the look of it, and the staccato movements of him, because it's all stop motion.
Yep.
It's, you know, it's pretty fluid. It's not that staccato, but it feels right because it's a massive bronze figure. That was my Iron Hellboy. You know, giant robot Hellboy. Iron Giant. These things are all synonymous in my head now. Yeah, I mean that's what it was to me. It was this big clunking great lump of steel, and just trying to capture that feel as he fights daft creatures basically, and just, you know, things go boom. It's a Hellboy book.
Yeah.
It started small and it got bigger. I mean, it was only supposed to be, I think it was originally, it was going to take up half of a single issue.
Oh,
We're talking about doing a one shot, and we're talking about how we could. Mike just said, "Do you want to draw?" Out of the blue, we hadn't done anything for a while. Do you want to draw a Hellboy book? Sure. What about if we do something? I think I might have said actually. The last thing we'd done together was the Beast of Vargu, and that was like an 16-page story and a 4-page story. So we were going to do, talking about just doing something like that, a couple of shorts really in one issue. And in fact, Giant Robot wasn't even in it initially. I think it was a couple of completely different stories. Then it turned into 2 issues with a half issue being given over to Giant Robot, I think. And then that just took over everything else.
yeah.
Because Mike was obviously just having too much fun with it. I think he was just remembering, you know, remember those quarantine sketches he did during the pandemic, and I think he revisited that giant robot idea 6 or 7 times, and you know, it was obviously something he thought was. He probably just drew it. Thought, well, that was dumb. That was good fun, and that was pretty much it. And it's silly, but it's silly on a big scale. And Mike couldn't help but draw it into the Hellboy mythos. So, you know, as always, things start simple, and Mike thinks, but if now we're doing this, we could connect it with this and connect it with this other thing, and I look more smart again because it looks like I've been planning it all along.
Yeah, right.
Which
Sure.
Mike's really good at doing that.
That's great.
So it's its own thing, and it is connected as well. And yeah, it's good, and there'll be more of it as well. I'm laying out the next one at the moment.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. It was enough, considering I wasn't sure I wanted to draw comics anymore.
Yeah.
It was enough fun to think, like, you know, if I'm going to draw some more, I can probably draw some more of this. So, you know, we've got a few more issues ahead of us. It's good.
You know, man, it's funny. Like, I think I was late in the game of just chasing the thing that I want to do. You know, I think I confused myself to say like drawing Marvel characters was what I wanted to do. You know, it really takes time to say, do the thing you want to do. You know, chase it, make what makes you specifically happy.
Yeah. You know, yeah, I can only agree with that. I mean, I had a few small experiences of drawing, because I mean, I read Marvel as a kid, and I dropped out of reading stuff for a long time. Just drawing a little bit of Spider-Man in the Tangled Web stories, that was enough to make me think, well, I don't need to draw Spider-Man again. I'm not suited to this, but it was fun to do it, even very briefly. And I got to draw all those curvy monsters in the Good Monsters thing, and that was fun. And the Hulk, the Thing, you know, I don't need to do it again. I don't need to live there. I've you know, it's like I visited them. I've doffed my cap as well as I could at the time, and move on.
Yeah,
I'm surprised that with Hellboy, it still works for me, I guess.
That's good.
As long as I don't read my own stuff.
Fine. Yeah. You can own body of work from that one, but the
yeah. I just go back to the source, and then I'm all cool with it.
Yeah.
But it is fun, and
it is the one comic book created, you know, in the last 30 years that feels like something new that we when it came out, we're like, this is completely new. Like I've never seen this before. and I want more of it. And I think and so to be able to play in that world is kind of probably the same joy of that 12-year-old in us.
I think that's as close as I'm going to get.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. That's okay. Anything else that like you want to, toot your horn about that's coming up and,
let me think. There's, do you know, I've not done a hell of a lot more that's going to be seen. There's a Fish Flies covers for Jeff Lemire that I think he couldn't wait and put out on Instagram already anyway.
Okay.
That was fun to do. I just completed an illustration for Ryan Hughes' new novel, the designer who's done so many comic logos. He's a novelist now. He's had 2 books out and working on his 3rd. And so, yeah, there's an illustration in that. That was fun. There's probably other stuff I'm not thinking of. Yeah, no, I'm happy with buy Giant Robot Hellboy and so that I don't have to.
Nice. Perfect. That's awesome. Well, Duncan, thanks. This was great. This is, it took us a while to line this one up, and I'm really happy that we took the time. I'm really grateful that you took the time. So
you're welcome. It's been fun.
Yeah.
It's been circuitous and tangential as I expected.